We're live. We are live. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Upper Hand Fantasy Podcast. This is Faraz. Siddiqui. Zach Rizzuto is here. It's Waiver Wire Monday. Well, you guys are listening. You guys are listening to it on Tuesday, but Tuesday we're here. You know what this means, right? It's week one, Zach. It's week one, baby. We're back. We got a game on Thursday, a real game on Thursday. Chiefs Lions, dude.
That's a really good opener. A really good opener. What I'm looking, I don't know about you, but I'm looking forward to most, got to be Jahmyr Gibbs, because we get to see him immediately off the bat. You know, there's been so much hype.
Matchup.
There's been so much hype. Like, if he doesn't put up a huge game, not even a huge game, if he doesn't put up just a solid game, 15 points or more, like, I think the fantasy world might be on fire. Especially if David Montgomery gets starts vulturing touchdowns out of nowhere. There's just so many different ways it could go. I'm just dying to see it happen because I have a solid amount of shares in Jahmyr Gibbs, and I think you do too, right?
Yeah, I do. And, you know, I honestly, man, in a full PPR, I don't know how he finishes under 15 fantasy points. I think, you know, if he has like a 13-point fantasy game, PPR fantasy points, I think I'm going to be happy. I'm like, all right, cool. This is fine. You know, maybe he didn't get as many touches as you wanted, but he still got you 13 fantasy points, PPR fantasy points. I'll be like, all right, I'm cool with this. Week one, let's keep it moving. Hopefully, the rest of my veterans on my fantasy team can take care of business. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I'll be happy. I'll be happy.
Worst case,
all right, guys. Yeah,
he ends up being DeAndre Swift, and we don't want that.
Yeah, we don't want. I mean, listen, if he is DeAndre Swift, but just without the injuries, I'll take it.
Yeah,
I'll take it all day long. I mean, listen, DeAndre Swift is pretty damn good, very efficient.
Yeah,
very on a per touch basis, fantasy points, legit. But he just couldn't stay on the field, and then they couldn't trust him. So, not great, not great. Guys, we have a waiver wire show. Games didn't even start yet, and we have a waiver wire show. Okay, we're excited to be back. Just to break down the schedule real quick before we get into the waiver wire. If you're on YouTube, you can already see the waiver wire. But if you're listening, you can't. So we're creating some suspense here. Okay. I just want to let you guys know what's going to go down for this season. Okay. The schedule. This is what we're doing. This week, only 2 shows. Okay. We're doing a waiver wire show, this one. And then we're going to do a matchup show that's going to be out Thursday morning, bright and early. Okay. Next. And then obviously on Saturday, I might have a little bit of an update podcast that I'll be putting out episode. I'll be putting that update Saturday episode out every single Saturday morning. Okay, it'll be just me, but basically, you know, there's so many injuries, like that injury news that comes out Thursday, and then updates on Friday, sometimes late Friday. Like we get those Seahawks injury updates, the practice reports at like 8 p.m. So we got to update those. So on Saturday morning, you'll hear that. You'll kind of get an idea of, you know, who I'm staying away from because of an injury, who I'm starting because of an injury, all that sort of stuff you'll get on Saturdays, okay? Sundays, starting this Sunday, I'll be going live, okay, with our Patreon members and all of our members. If you're in the homies tier or up, we're going to be doing a 10:30 Zoom call, start sit consultation, followed by a live on Instagram at 11, another live show at 11:30, and another live show at noon. So I'll be live for an hour and a half on Instagram from 11 a.m. Eastern time until 12:30. All right, and then the podcast. We're going to keep going with the podcast as well. 6 days a week, okay? Every single morning, early morning, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then that podcast I talked about on Saturday, okay? So we're with you all season long, all right? We're excited to be back. Let's get it popping, Zach. Let's get it popping. Were you surprised that I had Marvin Mims as my number 1 waiver wire pickup for this week?
No. I mean, we've been talking about Marvin Mims. I know you weren't like huge on Marvin Mims this offseason, but you talked about, you know, I know Jerry Jeudy had the injury and Tim Patrick went down. First, it was Tim Patrick went down, and you were like, oh, Marvin Mims, you know, he could have some opportunity here. You know, now he's a wide receiver 3, and then Jerry Jeudy goes down. Now he could be wide receiver 2. I'm feeling it. And I think it makes sense to have him here. I'm surprised that he's even on waivers, given, you know, Jerry Jeudy's status. I don't think this is like a 1-week thing for Jeudy, but that's just me. I'm not a doctor.
It doesn't seem like it, and I'll tell you why I wasn't super high on Marvin Mims. The analytics, if you read the rookie draft kit, he had high points everywhere, right? Like he was like very highly graded. He was like as highly graded as Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison, those guys. Why wasn't he? Why was his overall grade low? Because this draft kit came out before the NFL draft, and I was not expecting round 2 draft capital. Right. This was somebody who was expected to go round 3 or later, potentially day 3. But all the models were showing that like this is not what should happen here. He ends up getting taken in round 2 by Sean Payton, trades up to get him. Okay, so if Marvin Mims is available on your wire, like I'm doing what I can to put him on my roster. Jerry Jeudy, like you alluded to, like he might be out for a couple weeks, right? He could be back by week 3, week 4. And when there's opportunity for a young wide receiver that we already like, the analytics loves him. He was one of my favorite prospects in this class, who I didn't expect to see round 2 draft capital again, right? If you look at Fantasy Life's wide receiver rookie supermodel, it also has him pretty high. And I don't want that wide receiver on the waiver wire. He needs to be on my roster. So you might be asking why I'd want him, if Judy's going to eventually come back, right? Well, what if Mims turns out to be good, right? Like this is just the right process, in my opinion, to have this guy on your roster in this type of situation. So Jeudy, he can still come back, right? And all of a sudden, it's Jeudy and Mims as the fantasy relevant wide receivers on this team potentially, right? Or not, and it's still Jeudy and Sutton potentially, or Mims is the best wide receiver on this roster at some point because of injury or not, right? Now, that might be a small chance, right? But we play towards that high-end range of outcomes when the price is this low, right? So there's some upside here I don't want to miss out on, especially because he's going to be on the field a lot regardless, given the Tim Patrick injury, right? Even if Jeudy comes back. 11 personnel, Jeudy will likely be in the slot, but he can see a little bit of slot action. He's probably going to be a flanker with Sutton as a primary X. So I'm liking Mims, man. If he's available, he's hard to pass up on right now.
Right. There's all different ways they can use him, but I agree with your approach to the waivers 100%. You just can't just leave a guy that's going to potentially be a wide receiver too on a probably good offense. Obviously they look pretty bad last season, but I think Sean Payton can fix it. You can't leave that on the waiver wire to be scooped up by someone else after he has his big game. Part of the waivers is getting the players before their value spikes and everybody wants them. If you leave him there and he has a big game, you might be able to land him off the waivers, but even if you do, you're probably gonna be blowing a bunch of your fab to get him right off the bat. You're losing all this fab at the beginning of the season when you could have had him right now. If you wait a week, he has that big game, you're just gonna be losing fab, and you might be strapped later on when there's an even more valuable player sitting on the waiver wire. We saw that with Kenneth Walker last year. That kind of thing happens all the time. So you don't want to, cut yourself off and pigeonhole yourself into not getting guys down the line. When you have a guy like this sitting on the waiver wire, you definitely want to take a shot on him. But in Marvin Mims' case, you can't deny the volume that he's going to be stepping into. He looked good in the preseason action he got. And now he has a chance to establish a role for himself in the Broncos passing game, even once Jeudy comes back. Remember, guys, like Courtland Sutton, he might be a sleeper this year. There have been positive reports out of camp, but he didn't look irreplaceable last year either. So he's a guy, Marvin Mims, that you can grab right now before he appreciates, like I just said. And we could be talking season-long value if the cards fall the right way. I mean, that's the type of upside you chase on waivers.
100%, man. And a lot of times if you hit early, those are the best waiver wire pickups because, those are the guys that can help you every single week potentially, right? Now, Jaylen Warren is next up here. He needs to be rostered. Okay, number one, because he's a league-winning every down handcuff if Najee Harris were to get hurt, right? That's obvious. Number two, we've already seen his opportunity increase in situations this preseason with Najee and the first team that he wasn't too involved in last year, right? Not just the passing downs. It looks like he's going to get some early down work too. And I don't want to say that this is turning into a Zeke Pollard situation just yet because Najee, he isn't washed like Zeke was, but this has some sort of semblance to that, right? Like, especially early on in Pollard's career, like from a couple years ago, right? Warren is just somebody that I want to pick up if he's available. And if I drafted him, I'm holding him on my bench pretty much all season long if I can, right? And if someone drops him, I'm going to be pretty interested as well to pick him up and just hold him on my bench. Obviously, you can't always hold your handcuffs. If he doesn't end up having standalone value, I get it. Sometimes you got to drop him because you got to pick up somebody during bye weeks. I get it. But that's a tough drop for me. And I wouldn't be too happy about it if I had to drop someone like that.
Yeah, I wouldn't be either. I mean, we've been hyping up Jaylen Warren a lot on this podcast, and there were reports coming out, and there have been people disputing the reports. They've been like, well, Jaylen Warren, he could be the lead back come season's end. Apparently, that was like ESPN sources that said something like that. But then people were coming out and be like, oh, no, that's not necessarily true. And it's like, there's a lot of intrigue with Jaylen Warren now, not just because of what we've seen on the field, but also just what we're hearing in general. And it's tough to navigate that sometimes. But I think it might be a stretch to compare this to the Zeke and Pollard split last year. The Steelers coaching staff does love him, though, and I do think that they wouldn't hesitate to turn the keys over to Jaylen Warren if Najee would go down. Like the entire Pittsburgh offense this preseason, Warren was fantastic in the action that he saw, and he has a second gear that Najee Harris just doesn't have. And now that I'm talking about it, it does kind of sound like the Cowboys' backfield situation last year. Because what were we saying about Tony Pollard? He has that second gear. Zeke just doesn't have it anymore. I do trust Najee, though, to hold on to the early down role pretty comfortably this year. I don't think he's going to give that up. But as we know, receptions, targets are worth much more than attempts in the ground game, just rushing attempts. Warren's definitely a player that shouldn't be sitting around on waivers because of his ability in the receiving game. And like I keep going back to, I keep saying, like appreciable assets, that's what you want to target on the waiver wire. Jaylen Warren might be the handcuff to have this year, outside of maybe a guy like Tyler Algier.
I don't know. I'd rather have Jaylen Warren. And the reason for that is that Algier hasn't shown that he would demand targets or he would be targeted in the pass game. The reason why we know Bijan's going to be that dude because he's just that talented in the receiving game. I just don't know Algier will be that guy. I think he would be an early down handcuff, right, on a good offense potentially behind a great offensive line in Atlanta. But Warren, he'll be on the field in 2-minute drills. He'll be on the field on passing downs. He'll be running a lot of routes. So I would be pretty excited for that. Now, De'Von Achane, man, he's practicing as of Monday. He's number 3 in our list here. That's great news for someone who can take advantage of this Jeff Wilson injury, right? Raheem Mostert and Achane can be the 1-2 punch in this offense, and Achane will have a chance to gain more control of this backfield. Now, here's the thing with Achane, right? If he's eventually good to go, you have Wilson on IR. You have Mostert, who hasn't been able to stay healthy. This can turn into a De'Von Achane backfield pretty easily, right? Like, how many times have you started Raheem Mostert for fantasy, and he's gotten hurt, and then you were surprised, right? Like, that doesn't happen often, right? Like, you kind of have an idea. If Mostert got hurt, what would you say? Oh, here we go again, right?
Right.
So Achane should be rostered, especially given the fact that he's back in practice.
Yeah, I think that's 100% the move right here, especially with Jeff Wilson going on IR. If that wasn't the case, this is a completely different scenario. It'd be like, okay, well, he's back at practice, De'Von Achane is, but is he going to have the touches? Not sure. I wrote about it actually for the newsletter today, how this is perfect timing for De'Von Achane. I mean, the backfield has been wide open going all the way back to last year. And if Kareem Hunt, who supposedly has all these deals on the table, you're hearing about that. If Kareem Hunt signed there tomorrow, he'd immediately be the 1B to Jeff Wilson if he were healthy. It's not like this is a crowded, established backfield. There's plenty of moving parts. That's at the very least. So that tells you all you need to know about the potential upward mobility in Miami's backfield. We've seen players that are clearly more talented than the guys ahead of them waste away down the depth chart plenty of times. But with Wilson IR, the Dolphins, they're just forced to involve Achane right now. He's coming back. They drafted him. He's super talented. He can take advantage of it. And you're absolutely right about a potential takeover in the backfield. Mostert and Wilson, my point before, they aren't guys you're holding young talent off the field for. Achane owns the 9th highest PFF receiving grade among all running backs this preseason, which isn't nothing. That you can look at PFF receiving grades, say, oh, well, it's PFF. They grade differently than fantasy. There's all different things that go into it, but it's not nothing. It's important to note that he is a talented receiving back, and that's a role that he could have full control over just a few weeks into the season if he can establish himself in the backfield.
Yeah, man, and I agree. I think PFF ratings actually matter. If you don't watch every snap and you don't grade every snap, I ain't trusting you. You know what I'm saying? That's for sure. Okay.
we might watch our favorite teams, but that's about it. So if there's somebody out there that's watching every snap and every player, I'm going to pay a little attention to it at least.
Of course. If you had to pick one guy out of the guys we mentioned right now, do you have this in the same order? Or is there one guy that's standing out to you that maybe that we haven't talked about yet that you would take number 1 if you had to pick?
If I had to pick, I think it has to be Marvin Mims. That's the way I look at it. I mean, Marvin Mims, he has the clearest path to opportunity and the talent that matches to actually be excited about making a waiver wire pickup, putting a claim in for Marvin Mims. I wouldn't say I'm rushing to the podium. Not that you rush to a podium to make a waiver claim, but I'm not saying I'm rushing there. But at the same time, it's like you can be excited about Marvin Mims. I'm not going to be excited about adding a guy like, I don't know, Evan Hull, Zach Moss, something like that. And we'll get to them in a minute. But Marvin Mims, like, this is a guy that has the potential to not only start this week, but also be somebody you could lean on down the stretch. Like, when I'm looking at waiver wire pickups, like, if you want to look at long term, who can I lean on later in the season when injuries inevitably happen? That kind of thing. When players that I expected to be contributors down the stretch aren't. People that you can lean on and just be like, all right, if I have to put them in my lineup, is it going to be a lost week? It's not going to be. I think Marvin Mims has that type of capability.
I love it. All right, we got Tank Bigsby at number 4, Jaguars running back. So he crept into Travis Etienne's workload pretty easily. It happened quickly, right? He's taken some of the short yardage reps away with the first team in the preseason. He's shown that he's pretty good, with the reps that he did get. Like, I mean, Tank looked pretty good this preseason, right? Like,
yeah,
he did fumble at the goal line. That wasn't great. It was a goal line carry. Okay, so that matters, right? And Etienne, he was one of the worst at the running back position with fumbles last year, right? He lost like 5. I think he lost 3 of them, had 5 fumbles, something like that. But it wasn't good. Okay, so this isn't a clear knock on Bigsby in this backfield at this point. But this is a committee with Etienne clearly at the helm. Okay, no doubt about that. Like, I don't see this situation be like Tank is taking over or anything like that. And Etienne's going to be good this year. Okay, the offense is improving. I just didn't love the price, right? Based on the opportunity I think he's going to get. But this is also a good offense, and if Bigsby is going to get opportunity, I think he should be rostered, right? So that we can see how these roles develop, right? Because he got a lot of work early on in the preseason, right? And then Doug Peterson, if you remember, after I think the second or third preseason game, he said that his role is going to increase as the season moves along. That's what he said. So I want to see what that turns into. Is it going to turn into a 50-50 split? Is he going to get goal line carries on a good offense? What does that turn into? They've been talking about his hands. Like, is he going to be a better receiver? I'm curious, right? So I think I want him on my roster maybe for the first couple of weeks just to see if anything changes. And I think Bigsby can be droppable at some point, but understand this. If Etienne were to go down with an injury, you're probably spending all your fab on Tank Bigsby.
Yeah, 100%. That's what it would be. And this situation, man, like, it kind of reminds me of like the inverse of Pittsburgh's backfield, because here it's the presumed early down back that could give the every down back fits. It's the other way around. In Pittsburgh, Jaylen Warren's like the guy with the every down skill set, Najee Harris, early down, that kind of thing. If you listen to this podcast, though, I'm pretty much all the way out on Travis Etienne this season. I'm not a fan. The price was way too high. I want no part of him because the offense is going to lean even heavier into the passing game with Calvin Ridley. And Etienne, he just couldn't even get it done with significant volume last year. So it's like, why would I go in on him with potentially less volume this year? The coaches, like you said, Dougie P, he's talking up Tank Bigsby. I'm not sure that Travis Etienne's just going to be the guy at the top. I think he's going to have the majority of the touches, yes, but I wouldn't just go ahead and assume that this is going to be like a career year for Travis Etienne if Tank Bigsby is going to be semi-involved. And like I said, it's going to be pass first. There are definitely going to be instances this season, though, where Etienne managers are going to get excited. They're going to be like, Jaguars ran in for a touchdown. Who was it? And it's Bigsby. It's not Etienne. So I can see that happening. That being said, Bigsby isn't necessarily a priority addition for me because I do think the Jags will force feed Etienne the ball. But I think Bigsby will be more of a thorn in the side of Etienne than he will be his own standalone player, if that makes sense. So like Tank Bigsby, the volume can be there depending on his role. I don't think it's going to be like an Ezekiel Elliott, put him at the goal line every time and he just gets free touchdown situation. He'll have a couple. But like I said, that's not going to be enough to make him relevant. It's going to be enough to be a big enough pain in the ass to Travis Etienne's fantasy managers where it's just like, okay, what are we doing here? And that's been my gripe with Travis Etienne the whole season, the whole offseason since they added Tank Bigsby. So I think he's not a priority for me. Not necessarily, maybe not this high on the list, but I do see he has the potential to appreciate 100% if anything would happen. And like you said, if that role does increase over time, I could it be receiving reps? They were complimenting his hands. They're saying that he can work in the passing game. That wasn't something I was expecting to hear, but if they're seeing it, I'm going to go off of what they're saying because I'm not at camp.
Yeah, and you might prefer Deon Jackson, who's here at number 5, who, was probably a better start in week 1 than Tank Bigsby, right? And so let me address the Colts running back situation real quick. If you need a starter for week 1, for whatever reason, you should have your starters for week 1. But, let's say you lost Cup or you lost Judy and you need a flex. I'm going to pick up Deon Jackson. I'll start him as a flex option because I do think it'll end up being a committee between, him and Evan Hull in week 1. Shane Steichen already said that it's going to be a committee without JT regardless. Okay, Zach Moss probably won't be suiting up in week 1, but, he's someone on my radar as well, especially if neither Jackson or Hull show out in week 1 with the opportunity that they get, right? Because at that point, Moss will likely be at least in play to compete, right? And even start in week 2. You never know, especially if these guys shit the bed, right? So if you didn't end up with Jackson or Hull on your team, and by the way, I do like Hull. He was one of the best pass catching running backs in this incoming draft class, but I'm not sure that's what the Colts want right now, right? If you didn't end up with those guys and you're in a deep league and you want a running back stash, I think Moss is a solid stash. And what'll probably happen is that you stash Moss for a week or 2, and then the Colts end up signing Kareem Hunt once they realize that none of these guys can do their thing, right? And by the way, I do have my rankings up on patreon.com/upperhandfantasy. Every single week they will be up there, as well as waiver wire rankings with Fab guidance. Okay, that's starting next week. And there's no one to be spending that much Fab on this week. Okay, maybe I'll spend a couple bucks on Marvin Mims, Jaylen Warren, De'Von Achane, but that's really about it. I'm not really spending any money anywhere else. Any other thoughts on this Colts running back situation? Are you just staying away? Is this intriguing to you at all? Just curious what your thoughts are.
It's intriguing, but I think it's bait. This whole backfield, it's they're trying to get you to buy into it. And I say they. I'll just say that they are the fantasy gods because it's Jonathan Taylor's out and there's a huge role missing, and now somebody has to fill it. And they're doing it with a committee in Indianapolis. I don't think that's going to be worth it. It's bait. Even though it seems like Deon Jackson will be a fine pickup this week. I'm not expecting the world out of him. It's not going to be one of these situations where Deon Jackson comes in and suddenly, he's putting up 18, 20 points a game and he's going to separate himself from the rest of the backfield. That's not the case. I saw a report that said James Robinson was working out for the Colts today. That tells you what they think about the backfield right now. They're not going to lean on any one guy in this backfield. There's value to be had, but it's spread too far out among the running backs for anyone to really cash in on it. I don't think they're going to lean on Evan Hull because he's a rookie. Deon Jackson is the most familiar with the system. He filled in serviceably for them in the past. But if I'm going to add anybody, I think it might be Zach Moss for the long-term value that he presents. Deon Jackson can be added this week for flex, but hopefully you're not in a situation where you need to replace a running back already, unless you had Jonathan Taylor. The Colts running backs, they're really just last resort ads, in my opinion, because I look at their matchup in week 1. There's a chance that this offense just craters. And I don't want to bet on that because I like Anthony Richardson as much as the next guy, but they're going to play against the Jaguars, who are loaded on offense. And if they can't keep up offensively, it's going to be throwing the ball. Throw the ball. I don't care how much you can rely on Anthony Richardson's legs. It's not going to translate to rushing attempts for running backs. If they're throwing it a lot, these running backs, there's not going to be much to them, especially if they're rotating in and out. So I'm looking at the matchup here. Deon Jackson, he seems like, this would be like a slam dunk waiver ad, and he'll be fine. But I would temper expectations largely because I don't see them really winning this game, and I don't think it's going to be very close either.
I have Kendre Miller here at 6. I really want more information on that hamstring injury, right? There was no word on whether it would affect his week 1 status. I would imagine that it does. It seems like it's going to be the Jamal Williams show in week 1 right now, if I had to guess today, Monday night. But if the hamstring injury isn't that serious and he could be back for week 2, I think it's worth prioritizing him and just keep him on your bench for now, right? And you can throw him in your IR spot if he is out in week 1, right? So if he's out, you throw him in IR, you pick up somebody else. Again, I do think he's a better talent than Jamal. You probably have heard that on this show before. But these injuries aren't helping him at all, right? It seems like he's being rushed back from injuries at this point, right? He had the knee sprain and then he played a couple days later. That was kind of weird. Now he has a hamstring injury. And what if they rush him back from that also because they're desperate? because Alvin Kamara's not there, and this is their day 2 pick. You know what I'm saying? So, but I'll say this: like if Kendrick can be back by week 2 or week 3, I think if he has like 2 good games, he has a chance to solidify himself as a complement to Alvin Kamara over Jamal Williams. It is possible. The beat reporters think so as well. All that remains to be seen, though, given the time that he has missed, right? So he's intriguing. At the same time, though, the injuries make it a little lackluster. At the same time, though, like it's hard for me to just leave him on the waiver wire, if he's one of the best options out there. And you have a bench spot that you can burn in terms of a guy at the end of your bench who doesn't offer too much upside for you.
Right. That doesn't sound rosy, but you have to understand the way the value can change. You know what I mean? We wouldn't be talking about Kendre right now on the waiver wire episode if it weren't for that injury bug they picked up. I'd argue we'd be talking about him on the rankings episode a couple days later.
So true.
I think that's what we would be doing. And
100%.
if you watch the show, like we cover, I think it's the top 20 running backs. So like that gives you an idea of how we would be talking about him. I think I might 100%. Put him in there. So
100%.
Even if Miller were to suit up for week 1, I doubt it. I doubt he's going to be playing at 100% if he does suit up. I mean, the Saints, they also have a quarterback in Derek Carr who, even though he looked good in the preseason, they need to help him get comfortable in the first regular season action with the team. That's going to be done most likely with Jamal Williams at this point. I don't think they want to have Kendre Miller running into a pile at the goal line fresh off an injury. I bet that he misses week 1. And if that's the case, then I would absolutely advocate for stashing him on IR. But I think that we also have to be prepared for him to not get up to speed and established in the Saints offense before Kamara comes back. There's obviously a chance that he does, and he has a role for himself, and he complements Alvin Kamara like we want him to. But if Alvin Kamara comes back from suspension, he doesn't have his feet underneath him, that wouldn't be good news for season-long prospects. Because at that point, Kamara is going to be able to do probably everything that Kendre Miller does, just a level higher. Kamara is far from washed. He's very talented, and Kendre Miller is also very talented, but I think they're kind of comparable in what they do. Jamal Williams wouldn't be taking the receiving work. It would be Kendre Miller. But if you have Alvin Kamara to do that, why would you take him off the field? So that's my concern here.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think Alvin Kamara can use a compliment on early downs because it's been 2 straight years now where he's been pretty inefficient on the ground. And that's where I think Kendre Miller has a little bit of an opportunity. And that's why I'm excited for him. Now, if Kamara was Kamara that we knew from a couple of years ago, I would not be excited about Kendre Miller at all because I think that Kamara would have to be out of the way for him to have any value. I don't think Kendre Miller can reach his ceiling while Kamara's healthy. I think it could be a 1-2 type of punch. That the type of 1-2 punch that we've seen in a Sean Payton type of system before, and that's what I'm kind of excited about. And remember, this is a Sean Payton system, even though he's not in New Orleans anymore. This is Dennis Allen, worked under Sean Payton for a while, so a little excited there.
The roots are still there,
for sure. And another Saint, right? And if you need a tight end, Juwan Johnson, Luke Musgrave. Those are the 2 tight ends that seem to be available on a lot of waiver wires. I'd rather have these guys than a few of the other tight ends who are more widely rostered, okay? I'd rather have these 2 over Cole Kmet. I'd rather have them over Dalton Schultz, Gerald Everett. I see people still drafting Greg Dulcich, Derek Carr. Okay, Derek Carr's not a tight end, right? He's not a tight end. No. Why did I have Derek Carr in my notes, Zach?
Because he's throwing to Juwan. Yeah. Because he's throwing to Juwan.
Derek Carr. I'd rather start Juwan Johnson and Luke Musgrave over Derek Carr in my tight end spot. All right. But are there any of those tight ends that I mentioned, like outside of Derek Carr? Like, would you rather have them over these 2 guys that I just mentioned?
I think if you asked me 2 weeks ago, I might have said Dalton Schultz, but we know that he's kind of trending down for some reason.
I think Schultz is the closest for sure.
Yeah.
I think he's like kind of maybe in that tier, but I just think the other 2 have more upside.
Yeah, 100%. He's the closest in terms of will he be able to earn a full, route participation, target share, solid target share. I mean, Cole Kmet's there too, but Justin Fields threw the ball just over 20 times a game last year. And I don't want to rely on that when they added, DJ Moore. And they still have.
That's my concern. They still have Darnell Mooney.
That would be the
Chase
concern.
Claypool's going to get some targets. Like, how much do we have to rely on? Like, that target distribution might be thin after DJ Moore. DJ Moore might get like a 30% target share this year, and then like still only end up with like 110 targets for the year.
Yeah, that's
very
the beauty
possible.
of it. In Chicago, 30% target share in Chicago is much different than 30% target share in LA. We're going to talk about the Chargers or another high volume offense like Minnesota.
And we've heard this, like there's been a little bit of a rapport between Juwan and Derek Carr, right? So like, we saw glimpses from Juwan last year, right? Like if you guys were streaming tight ends, like Roschon Johnson was one of those guys that, you wanted, right? He was a former wide receiver. He got a quarterback upgrade. They have a rapport now. And I think he should be rostered. Like, and Luke Musgrave, we talked about it a few times. Like he's a rookie. So I'd rather have Juwan, but this dude is running a route on at least 80% of dropbacks. Okay. And they're trusting their rookies this year. We have Jayden Reed on this list as well a little bit later. We'll talk about him in a sec. But Juwan Johnson at 7, Luke Musgrave at 8. These two tight ends are guys that I would want to pick up. If I have a risky tight end, like even if I have a Chig Okonkwo, right? Like I like Chig. I'd rather have him than both of these guys on my roster. However, if I have Chig, I kind of want one of these guys also, just in case Chig doesn't work out. Because that's possible. It's possible that you see Hopkins and what's his name?
Burks.
Getting the targets. And Treylon Burks getting all the targets, right? It's very possible. So you kind of want to, just make a little bit of a hedge. If you drafted a good tight end already, I don't think there's much reason to roster either of these guys. If you, and when I mean good, I mean like an established fantasy tight end.
Yeah, that would be like a top 6, maybe 7, if you want to call Evan Ingram established, that kind of thing. But,
yeah, I think Pat Freiermuth, if I drafted him, like I feel like I would be solid. Like I wouldn't need to grab that second tight end.
That's fine. Yep. Juwan,
now
he can
go ahead.
Be the tight end that lives off touchdowns, and he finishes inside the top 10 by the end of the year. So if he's on your waiver, just go pick him up. If you need the tight end, like we just said, if the connection with Carr carries over into the regular season, we could see him outscore most of the starters in your league, on a consistent basis. Like you just mentioned, Pat Freiermuth kind of being that line where you draw the line in terms of those types of players. But you mentioned Kmet, Everett, like I said, David Njoku. Like I could see him outscoring those guys on a weekly basis, more often than not. But I think there's more intrigue with Luke Musgrave because there's really only one established weapon in Green Bay. That's Christian Watson. And we could see Musgrave become a favorite target of Love's by the middle of the season. Truth is, nobody's going to go wrong starting either of these guys because they both fall into that tight end crapshoot range, But they're worth picking up if you're thin at tight end. They could establish themselves as weekly low tight end ones, but you could say that for about 15 different guys, I think, right now.
Right. Exactly. Now, at number 9, I have DJ Chark. Assuming Adam Thielen is already rostered in your leagues, like I've seen Adam Thielen, like on the waivers in some 10-team leagues. I'd rather pick Thielen up right now at this point. Zach from 3 months ago is like, I told you for us. I've totally come around on Thielen after seeing what his connection with Bryce Young in the last preseason game was good to see. Chark was a little bit banged up, but still good to see it. I think DJ Chark will be next up, potentially, right? And he's back at practice as of Monday with today. He himself is optimistic he'll be good to go for week 1. Who knows? But since he was someone who was gelling with Bryce Young and supposedly his go-to before he got banged up, I think he's worth a pickup, even if you're not playing him this week. Preferably I wouldn't want him to play this week because you don't want to see him play and then re-aggravate his injury, right? And it was a soft tissue injury. So you want to make sure that he's all right. Now, let me ask you a question. Would you rather pick up DJ Chark or the rookie?
Jonathan
would you rather
Mingo? Oh, boy. I think I'm picking up DJ Chark. I like Jonathan Mingo too, but I've been the big Adam Thielen guy here. I've been this whole offseason. There's room enough in the Panthers passing attack to have 2 starting caliber wide receivers. I do expect Adam Thielen to have the stronger start to the season between him and DJ Chark, even if he comes back sooner rather than later. But I have a feeling that Thielen can be that stepping stone for Bryce Young. And this is kind of what I laid out earlier in the offseason. He's a veteran. The young quarterbacks tend to like those quarterback-friendly receivers. Adam Thielen is one of those guys. Thielen can be the stepping stone Bryce Young uses to acclimate to the NFL. And then DJ Chark can be the next stone in the order to help Young push the ball downfield and become a playmaking quarterback, that kind of thing. I have a feeling Bryce Young's going to take it easy to start. Chark has the higher upside for this season than Thielen. Thielen's going to have a safer floor. So you're targeting Thielen for the floor, not the upside. But Chark is worth a pickup right now, considering that he can be the wide receiver one on the offense by midseason. And to go back to like what you said about Jonathan Mingo, I don't know if I want to pick him up just yet. There's a chance he's going to stick around on the waivers for a week or two yet. I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of noise out of him, especially in the early going. You could probably hold off on getting him, but there's definitely there's a world where he comes out and he could be the wide receiver 2 on the offense. I think as long as Adam Thielen is healthy, though, he's going to kind of clog up one of those 2 spots, the starting roles, and that's going to leave Chark or Mingo as the odd man out. Right now, my money is on Chark and Thielen being those guys for the majority of the season.
I agree with you. And at number 10 here, we have Roschon Johnson. Depending on how you want to play this, he might be a little higher of a priority for you if you're willing to be a little patient, right?
Yeah.
Should Roschon Johnson be a little higher in this list, Zach?
I like Roschon Johnson, but just I don't see him overtaking Khalil Herbert in a way it's going to make him fantasy relevant just yet. Even getting to that 1B spot, I don't necessarily know if I see that happening right now. So I think this is appropriate. I don't think this is too high or too low. He's worth throwing a couple fab dollars at, but don't break the bank on him right now.
Yeah, I hear that. And honestly, like, this is a 3-way timeshare right now in Chicago, right? So the chances that, someone other than Khalil Herbert has a fantasy impact right away is relatively low, right? And you might have to wait several weeks before there's a clear 1A, 1B situation, right? Like, I do think he has the chance of emerging in this backfield, Roschon, okay? And I've said it before, I don't think he completely takes over because Herbert is that good, right? He can be fantasy relevant, though, right? And if Herbert gets hurt, I think we can see a potential takeover at that point. And someone who has RB1 upside off of talent and skill set alone, I think Roschon is that guy. Okay, so he has the ability. He just needs the opportunity. I just don't think he's going to get the opportunity without an injury, okay? I do have D'Onta Foreman at number 13 on this list a little bit later on. Why? Because just because I believe in a player doesn't mean that I can't see all the potential possibilities and the full range of outcomes for a particular situation, right? In this situation, can Foreman carve out a role ahead of Roschon? Yes, like he was already doing in the preseason, right? And he was solid last year. And, maybe they want a veteran. So maybe Roschon gets hurt. This is still a competition to me. And if Roschon hasn't won it full, if he hasn't beat out Foreman just yet in the preseason, then, maybe it's still a competition, right? So until then, we still have to pay attention to Foreman, despite how much I like Roschon. But, if you have an empty bench spot, I think Roschon is a decent way to stash somebody. I think if you're going to stash somebody, I think Roschon is a solid stash, I would say.
Yeah. I think it's a solid stash too. I would say the case for Johnson is a 1B or RB2 to Herbert. I think that's much more feasible than the D'Onta Foreman agenda. Just because Foreman, he signed with the Bears for pretty much pennies, and they drafted Johnson pretty high. If Johnson were to play well, I find it hard to think that the Bears would want to take him off the field for a journeyman running back like Foreman. Who he was solid last year. He isn't going to put distance between himself and Johnson though in that RB2 or 1B position. They're going to be pretty much. I think at the worst case for Johnson, the same running back. I think Johnson's way more talented. He's going to, kind of distance himself from D'Onta Foreman in this backfield. I get it. You're right that there's a reality where Foreman outplays Johnson and, he's on the field over him the majority of the time. But that's like one reality in hundreds of realities. You know what I mean? So like that path, I just don't see it happening. I think there's a higher possibility that Johnson is the guy behind Khalil Herbert over Foreman. I think it's
a much higher possibility. I agree
much
with
higher.
You.
Yeah. I'm going to just go ahead and say it now. Like I'm dismissing Foreman as a potential fantasy asset at this point, just given the talent ahead of him, which is Johnson and Khalil Herbert. And then also the Justin Fields that the Bears have at quarterback, who's also going to be running the ball a lot. So are there going to be enough carries for, him to kind of carve out a role? They drafted Johnson high. They like Khalil Herbert. I'm just going to go ahead and say that Foreman's probably depth at this point. So I'm not worried about him sneaking up on Johnson at this point. So I think that's also going to be a good stash.
Well, I hear you, man. I mean, the thing is, like, he was still playing over him in preseason, right? And but I do think that it's going to take a couple weeks, but I think Roschon will end up winning that RB2 job at the very least. So I do agree with you.
Betting on the talent. Yep.
Yeah. Now, before we go to number 11, it's week 1, and that means underdog fantasy pick'ems. Okay. If you know fantasy, you'll have a great time choosing higher or lowers on a ton of players this Thursday night. So many to choose from, right? Chiefs Lions. Okay. That's going to be a good game and a lot of players that you can choose from. And the best part is one of those picks are free. Okay. Choose the higher on Patrick Mahomes 0.5 total yards. Okay. All he needs is 1 yard any way possible, rushing, passing, it doesn't matter. You have your free square on your way to 20x your entry. So you choose a few player stat lines to go higher or lower on. You put them together on one entry and you root for those players as you're watching. Okay. You root for them to fail and you root for them to succeed. However, you ended up putting your entry in. So you can download Underdog Fantasy today. If you do sign up, you use code Upper Hand to get or over here, Upper Hand Pod, please, so we know where you came from. Use the code Upper Hand Pod to get your first deposit doubled up to $100. Again, use code Upper Hand Pod or Upper Hand. I really don't care. To get it doesn't matter. Same thing. To get your first deposit doubled up to $100, and make sure to take advantage of this special Week 1 Patrick Mahomes promo. Okay. The links will be in the description of this episode if you need it. Okay. All right. Moving back to the waiver wire at number 11. I have Romeo Doubs. Now, keep in mind, he currently has a hamstring injury. Okay. His head coach said that he was held out of the last game because of it, and it was mostly precautionary. No word on whether he'll be suiting up for week 1 or not just yet. We'll get a practice report on Wednesday. I'm not a big Doubs guy. Okay. I am a Jayden Reed guy. I'm a Christian Watson guy. And I do have Reed on this list a little bit later at number 16. So you might be wondering why I have Doubs before Reed. So if I had to bet on who is going to have a better career, I would bet on Reed. But I'm not going to ignore all the talk about the rapport between Doubs and Jordan Love this offseason in training camp. Okay. And to be honest, you saw the rapport in preseason too. Okay. I still think Watson is the one, but it's possible that Doubs legitimately worked on his game and came back a better player this year. I just didn't think he was that good last year. He was okay with some opportunity early on in the year with Rodgers, but it seems like there is a rapport there. So he gets the edge for me above the rookie Jayden Reed right now. Also, Reed is only playing in 11 personnel. When there's a slot wide receiver on the field, he's only playing slot right now. He's not playing any of the positions. He's off the field in 12 personnel. So, while Doubs is healthy, I think Doubs will be up there with Watson in routes run. So he gets the edge for me.
Right. So this kind of surprised me, but then we actually put it into context. I know you're Jayden Reed guy over Romeo Doubs. I think Doubs' value is going to come from what you just outlined. That's route participation, being on the field. Jordan Love really does have a connection with him. He'll be fantasy relevant, mainly in PPR formats, and he'll have a floor worth targeting. I'm about as bullish on Doubs as I am Adam Thielen. That is, I'm not wowed by the upside, but I am interested simply because he could be a strong flex any week I need one. And, there's a chance he's a 70 catch guy this year. So I do think he's worth targeting waivers right now before he has a bigger game and suddenly he's pumped up to a toss in value for trade purposes. He could have flex value, that kind of thing. But the trick here is to not expect the world from him. His talent doesn't blow me away. I know it doesn't blow you away either. I think any production this season is going to come from his situation more than his talent. But at the end of the day, especially in redraft, it comes down to that number in the game log every week. So he can be fantasy relevant. Doubs can, this season. I'm not counting on him. I think Christian Watson's a guy you want to target for upside. I think if you're going season long upside, you want to go for Jayden Reed too. But Romeo Doubs, he's going to be able to start for you. I'd say for the first half of the season, probably, assuming, it doesn't just fall off the edge of the world and look terrible. But he hasn't this preseason. I'm not expecting that to happen. I like his floor. That's all. That's all I'm targeting.
And he has looked good this preseason. He's had the contested catches, and it seems like they do have a little bit of a connection. Okay, so I don't want to deny that, and I do want like if I really wanted to run with my own narrative that Romeo Doubs sucks, I would. Okay, but I'm trying to not do that right now, and I think I'm trying to be my objective self here. And I saw what I saw. So I do like Jayden Reed though. I think if I had to bet on it long term, who has the better second half of the year, I would probably bet Jayden Reed. But rookie wide receivers, they might take a little bit of time. So we'll see how it goes. I mean, they do have a lot of mouths to feed here. If all these guys are going to be, after we talked about Luke Musgrave, obviously Christian Watson, Doubs, like Jayden Reed, like, hey, let's like, who's quarterback here again? Jordan Love. Let's first see what's going on here, right? Before we they got Aaron Jones, they got AJ Dillon, they might run the ball a lot. So let's keep this all in perspective here, right? So we'll see what that pecking order ends up being. At number 12 here, I have Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He's still involved, guys. He's not going anywhere for now. And he still has a chance of playing ahead of Isaiah Pacheco, or at least fully in the rotation. It's possible the Chiefs were just letting Pacheco start slow, but Pacheco was on the field after CEH. Okay, and if you're going to play Pacheco and he's the one, why not just play him before CEH and just take him off the field? So that didn't happen. And if Pacheco was the clear starter, that would have happened. So I think CEH should be rostered in most like 12-team or higher leagues. It's because just the simple fact that he's on the Chiefs, number one. Number two, they're playing on Thursday night. Okay, so you could, in a lot of leagues, depending on where you play, Sleeper, Yahoo, you could drop CEH after Thursday night with him on your bench, right? And then you can pick up somebody else, right? So just to kind of see what that role looks like, right? Because if it's good, then people are going to be trying to pick him up off of waivers. If it sucks, then and Pacheco's the 1A here, then you probably want to drop CEH to pick up somebody else with more upside, because McKinnon's still going to be involved as well. So I'm hoping that this isn't a 3-man backfield, but from what I saw in the preseason, it's not like Pacheco gets hit less if he comes in after CEH, right? Like he gets hit the same amount, or maybe harder, because the guys later on want to hit you harder and make a name for themselves.
This is true. That's fair. And I have a rebuttal here, but I do want to say that it does make sense. If you pick him up for Thursday and he doesn't show up, and he ends up being nothing, it makes sense to just take him just in case he does do something. So I didn't consider that when I looked at this, when I wrote up this rebuttal, but that's fair. It's a fair point.
If he wasn't playing on Thursday night, would I have been as inclined to roster him? Probably not. So I agree that's probably one of the main points there.
That's one of the main things for me looking at it. Now it makes sense, because I was trying to put it together when I was going through the notes for the episode, and I was like, no way Faraz is falling for this CEH thing again.
No. I mean, if I was falling for it, he would have been way higher, but this is more for like a depth running back option who plays on a great offense and could get goal line carries. That's pretty much what I look at. And just like how he did last year, where he was like getting goal line carries and touchdowns at an unsustainable rate early on, but like if you started him, you were probably winning your matchups pretty much.
It was all backwards and upside down. It made no sense. I just personally, I find it hard to believe that, with all the history CH and the Chiefs have together and the way Pacheco was playing down the stretch, they trusted Pacheco in playoffs. He was the running back that they used. Granted, it was an early down role. He didn't have much in the receiving game. I just think it's hard to say that they're going to turn back to CEH suddenly. I think they were just slow rolling him back, Pacheco, to make sure that nothing happens to him. It was weird usage, but how many times do we see weird usage in preseason? All the time. That's speculation on my end at this point. But I don't think that there's more speculation going into me saying that Pacheco is going to be the guy than there is CEH coming back from the history that he has with the Chiefs and suddenly being like this super involved guy that's going to be fantasy relevant. I just don't see that. I'm hoping that's the case. I want it to kind of like, I want the Chiefs backfield to just stratify, and I want Pacheco to be the guy. If he's going to be the guy, make him the guy. If it's going to be CEH, just make him the guy. That's what we want to see, but that hasn't been the case this entire time. So I can't even expect that at this point. At this point, I should just say, pick up Clyde Edwards-Helaire, because that's just how it's going to work.
and also it's like, we also want to kind of keep in mind of Clyde Edwards-Helaire, his issues last year. He had, I forgot what it was. It was like kidney surgery or something. Like, I forgot exactly what organ it was. He lost like 20, 30 pounds like before the season, which is a huge amount. So he just was never really himself to start the year. So something worth noting. And I'm trying to remember if that was the year before or not. If I'm just making excuses for him, I can't really remember if like it's all a blur at this point. So I don't even know what I'm talking about at this point. But there was some point he lost a ton of weight. I think it might have been the year before. Who knows? Who knows?
We're gonna go
never
with
mind.
that.
I don't know why. I'm becoming a Clyde Edwards-Helaire apologist.
Yes.
Now.
Well,
Why?
that's because he's on the
Why?
graphic. He's on the graphic.
Because he's number
so we have
12
to
on my waiver wire
justify him being
rankings?
on the graphic. Yeah.
Jesus.
We have
All
to
right.
justify it somehow.
Anyway, let's move on. All right. So at 13 and 14, I had Deontay Foreman and Evan Hull. We talked about both of them already. At 15, we have Van Jefferson. Solid pickup if you need some wide receiver help. If you're not starting Cooper Kupp this week because of the injury, I don't think he's like a real target earner or anything. He's never been one. So I don't think he benefits too much from Cooper Kupp being out, but he will benefit somewhat. He'll be startable. I think he'll probably be in that wide receiver 3 range, if that. But he is somebody that you can pick up in a deeper league, 12-team or higher with Cooper Kupp out. I think he's startable.
Yeah. I think the biggest takeaway here is that Tyler Higbee's early season target share is about to be crazy.
Yeah, for sure.
That's my takeaway. I mean, I
26% for sure.
Yeah.
Easily.
I wouldn't rule out Puka Nacua either as a potential spot contributor. I know you liked him coming out, but who knows? Old man Stafford said it himself that he's having trouble building a connection with the youngins. So Jefferson's not a total stranger to solid flex production. He had a couple productive weeks over the past 2 years. He's had a very limited role in the Rams offense. I'm not going to just write him off, but I like him to help fantasy teams in flex spots, and that's about it. I'm not going to be throwing him in as a wide receiver 2 or anything. I will say I do think Jefferson's going to be a higher scoring, more productive pickup on the waiver wire than any Colts running back in week 1. So I might move Van Jefferson up a little bit. I might put him over Evan Hull. I might even put him – I don't want to put him over Deon Jackson. I would put him over Evan Hull at this point because I just think that he has a clearer path to more quality work than a guy like Evan Hull at this point. If you're talking about adding a guy to put in your flex, I'm taking the receiver every time.
Yep. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. We should probably move Van Jefferson up here. So Van Jefferson's at 15. Let's maybe move him up to – should we move him after Roschon, I would say? Maybe before Romeo Doubs? Should we put him at 11 or 12? I think actually let's put him at 12. Does that make sense? After Romeo Doubs, or would you take him before Romeo Doubs?
I think Romeo Doubs should stay over Van Jefferson because Van Jefferson, he's like, I know we have that little short-term blip next to him. That's like a 2 or 3 week thing, assuming Cooper Kupp comes back. If it comes out and Cooper Kupp is like, oh, well, he's going to miss 6 weeks, Keenan Allen-esque, then maybe we talk about Van Jefferson moving up over Romeo Doubs because Romeo Doubs is going to be contributing, I think, throughout the whole season, even if it's just like at a wide receiver 3 level. But Van Jefferson, I would put him over those running backs ahead of him, I think, because he has more production potential than those guys right now.
Let's move Van Jefferson up to 12. Let's do that. I think that's the move. So Romeo Doubs, Jefferson, CEH, Deontay Foreman, Evan Hull. I have Jayden Reed at 16 here. We talked about him a little bit. Very, very talented route runner. I think him the fact that he's able to start out of the slot is great. He's not somebody that is limited to the slot. Like he could play the X if he wanted to. He can separate man coverage. He's good against zone 2. So like I think he can prosper in the slot. I like him a lot. As a prospect, I like him a lot more than Romeo Doubs. Both these guys were at the Senior Bowl. I saw both of them myself. Night and day type of players. However, I have to understand that it's possible that Romeo Doubs got better as a pro.
Yeah.
Possible. We'll see. Now,
did he get better?
Who knows? Spoke about Zach Moss already. Had him at 17 here, and you mentioned that he's probably the ad because probably the most long-term upside if JT were to be out. Correct?
Right. Yep.
Okay. And then at 18 and 19, we have Brock Purdy and Sam Howell in that order. Why do I have Purdy ahead of Howell? Purdy averaged 18.1 fantasy points in his 6 starts at the end of last year. He had a 3-touchdown game to start the playoffs. He can continue to be a good fantasy quarterback under Kyle Shanahan. He's healthy now. They traded away Trey Lance, before seeing it again on the field this year from Purdy, which is absolutely bonkers to me. But nonetheless, by the way, Zach, like we never talked about it, dude. Like, how do you feel about that trade to your Cowboys? We never addressed it on the pod.
No, we didn't. And that was just kind of something that flew under the radar. I'm a big fan of the trade, but for purposes outside fantasy football, so I'm just going to keep this abridged. Dak is going to have a huge cap hit next year. in the range of $60 million, which is just ridiculous. So if he stinks it up this year, Dallas wants to get out. That's not going to happen. Lance is at the very least an intriguing option with upside and a good Cowboys offense. Gives Dallas some leverage. I have no problem with that whatsoever. He only has 4 starts in his career. So I don't know how you could go wrong betting on talent there at the price of just a 4th-round pick. Like you said, you were surprised. I was surprised too. I'm surprised that they even traded him. Like, first of all,
that's what I'm surprised
Dallas.
about.
Yeah. First, they traded Dallas, but then it's like, this is a guy that has 4 starts, not anywhere close to a full season starting. We don't know what Trey Lance is and can be. He had no shot. But yeah, like you said about Purdy, I'd expect more of the same production that we saw from him last year in 2023, because every quarterback not named Trey Lance seems to succeed in San Francisco, including Sam Darnold. So that's an interesting storyline.
How can you give up that much for a quarterback in the draft, give up that many assets, not give him a chance, and then trade him away for a 4th-round pick without giving him a chance? On top of that, you don't want to see if Brock Purdy was a flash in the pan? Like, you don't think that's a possibility? I'm not saying he is, and I'm hoping he doesn't, because I want to see this offense thrive because they have such good players. Yeah. But, like, dude, like, Sam Darnold is your saving grace if Brock Purdy gets hurt. Like, he's going to be fine. I think Darnold's going to be fine in this system. But, damn. Like, is that the route that you guys are going? Like,
was it hurting your roster? Was it capping you that much with your roster management to have Trey Lance on the roster, like on the 53? Was it that big of a deal that you had to move him out? I'm fine with it, because I'm fine with it.
And then you consider the fact that, do you remember the 49ers quarterback troubles in the playoffs?
Oh, yeah.
Like, they literally created a new rule in the NFL this year for the emergency quarterback because of them.
Yeah.
And then they ship off their 3rd quarterback.
Yeah, their emergency quarterback.
What are they doing?
Did you try reading that? They posted all over Twitter. Did you try reading all the FAQs that they had? Like, not even worth it. Like, it's I think so confusing.
I think I got it.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to explain it here, but I think I got it. It's basically,
that's not what this podcast is for.
53-man roster. Okay, I'll just do it real quick because you brought it up. 53-man roster. They have to be on the 53, but they don't have to be part of the 46 or 47 that are active on game day. That's all. That's all it is. So they can have a 3rd quarterback who's not officially an active player, and that's the only role they can play. That's all. That's it. It's that simple. Now, if you listen to the show, you know how much I like Sam Howell, his weapons, his OC, his situation, and he gets to do it against the Cardinals in week 1. Okay. And it doesn't get better than that. Howell is unproven, so take everything with a grain of salt, but I think he could do some things in his first start this year, which actually ended up being his 2nd start of his career. No, so if I'm looking at, if you go to fantasylife.com, they have something called the Game Hub, okay, where they have a whole dashboard of every single game. It's pretty awesome. You guys should go check it out. But Washington is favored by 7 points in this game. So the feeling is that Howell shouldn't have much of an issue in this one, right? The running backs should be able to close it out, but Howell should be able to give you, 2 tutties this week pretty easily, I would say.
Yeah. If Howell can't get it done, 2 tutties. If Howell can't get it done this week against the Cardinals, then we might have to just delete all the episodes we have talking about Sam Howell as a potential breaker of fantasy football. Like,
I have an out for him, though. I have an out. No Terry McLaurin potentially. I have an out.
Okay, that's fine. All right, maybe not, but that would be a lot of episodes going out of the timeline.
For sure.
All the talking we've done about Sam Howell. The reality is, though, the Commanders, they're going to win this game against the Cardinals. That's just how it's going to go. They're maybe one step up from the preseason squads that Howell faced these past few weeks. Like, what's the gap really between preseason Ravens and the Cardinals?
Right. Exactly.
I don't think there's that much of a gap at this point. Maybe I'm writing off the Cardinals, but I think it's pretty safe to say that Howell should be fine. If Howell doesn't put up 2 touchdowns with ease, we're going to be questioning a lot come Monday. There's going to be a lot of questions about what happened. Like, I think Terry McLaurin being out, if he is, would answer some of them, but there would be more than just that, because he scored 2 touchdowns against Dallas in week 18 last year, and Dallas was a much better team than the Cardinals. I mean, granted, it wasn't a good showing by them, but there's more talent on that Cowboys defense than the entire Cardinals team right now. So if he doesn't,
I don't know how Zach got to the Cowboys just now. Like where you just wanted to bring up your team.
No,
That's all you
this
wanted
is
to do
this
this
is how
week.
we got there. Sam Howell's lone game, the small sample size we got with him came against my Cowboys. So we're always going back to that game until he plays more. Now, obviously, we had the
True.
preseason, but like I said, this preseason. He's playing basically a fourth preseason game in week 1 against the Cardinals. So
Pretty much. Now, the last guy we have on this list at 20 is Zay Jones. One notable change this year is that Christian Kirk isn't running in anything but 11 personnel this year. Okay. In the preseason, he's been off the field in 12 personnel with Zay Jones and Calvin really on the field. So this means that Jones will likely run more routes than Kirk this year if both stay healthy. Okay. So I'm not saying he's going to demand targets at a higher rate than Kirk, but it is worth noting that their targets were strikingly similar last year. Okay. Kirk is the better player. Yes, he is. But Jones is going to have his games too, right? Given the offense will take a step forward. He had his games last year on an inferior offense when this offense started to get it together a little bit last year. Zay Jones had his games. Now, obviously, Calvin Ridley is going to assume a ton of targets here, but I think Zay Jones is still going to have his games here and there, not an every week starter or anything like that, but somebody who could, offer a little bit of a little bit of a spot start for you if you need it at wide receiver.
Oh, yeah. We spent the entire season last year with the threat of potential Zay Jones games hanging over us. Like, you know what I'm talking about with the Zay Jones games, which is like suddenly he's the receiver. And he did that like 3 times last year.
Yeah.
Just when we thought we were out, they pull us right back in. That's the case, it seems like, once again. And in the Jaguars offense, it's loaded with quality pass catchers. I mean, any of these guys could reasonably finish as a top guy in the box score any given week. So Zay Jones is one of those guys. Calvin Ridley, he's clear, I think, of the next guys, if you want to call him that. That would be Christian Kirk. That would be Zay Jones, those guys. But he's going to produce independent of what the rest of the offense does. But I do think that Kirk and Jones are going to be the ones trading blows this season for targets. I think Evan Ingram gets thrown into that bucket as well. Jones could be worth a start in a flex in a pinch and in a good matchup. If you get Zay Jones in a good matchup and, you don't really have anybody else to start, that's when I'd be like, okay, it's Zay Jones time. And you just bet on him having that game that he has 3 of every year.
Exactly. And yeah, pretty much. Now we would normally have streamers for you guys as well, but this is week 1. You have your guys, you have your streamers already. We gave you a list of players you can use to improve your roster ahead of week 1. So we'll get to real weekly streamers next week. Okay. So also, if you're in a league that can drop players midweek, as you mentioned earlier, after they play, you might want to add a couple of Kansas City players who are on the waiver wire: Richie James, Rashee Rice, Justin Ross, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, just in case they have a bigger role than you think. If not, you just drop them on Friday, and then you pick up another upside handcuff for Sunday, and then maybe drop them on Sunday night, do the same thing on Monday night, basically, and then just pick up your waiver wires the following week. All right, so that's going to do it for this episode, guys. By the way, let me just remind you to make sure to take advantage of the Patrick Mahomes promo on Underdog. Use code UPPERHAND to double your first deposit up to $100. You'll have a chance to 20 extra entry for some pick'ems. Also, if you want my full week 1 rankings and the rankings every week, they will be available on patreon.com/upperhandfantasy. And you'll even have more stuff, not just rankings, a bunch of stuff, okay, to help you win your fantasy league. If you guys can subscribe to the podcast, that would mean the world to us. Just hit add or follow or subscribe wherever you listen. We greatly appreciate that. And we'll be back on Thursday this week. We'll be talking matchups. Football's back, baby. Talk to you guys on Thursday. And by the way, remember, starting next week, 6 days a week. That's what we're doing this podcast. All right. We're crazy. See you guys then. Take it easy. Bye-bye.